In the world, there exist many lecturers that amaze the audience with their eloquence. However, few are those who know how to listen. To know how to listen is something very difficult. In truth, very few know how to listen. When the master or mistress or the lecturer is speaking, the audience seems to be alert and following the word, appearing to listen and be attentive. However, in the psychological depths of each one of them, there is a secretary who is translating the lecturer's words. That secretary is the I, the myself, the oneself. The work of that secretary is to misinterpret or mistranslate the words of the lecturer. The I translates according to its prejudgments, preconcepts, fears, prides, anxieties, ideas, etc., etc., etc. The students in the school or the people that form the audience are in reality not listening to the lecturer. They are listening to themselves. They are listening to their own ego, their beloved Machiavellian ego, which is not disposed to accept the real, the true, the essential, only in a state of alert novelty, with a spontaneous mind, without the weight of the past, in a state of full receptivity, can we really listen without the intervention of that bad secretary called the I, the myself, the oneself, the ego. When the mind is conditioned by memory, it only repeats what it has stored. The mind, conditioned by the experience of so many yesterdays, can only see the present through the dirty glasses of the past. If we want to learn how to listen in order to discover the new, we must live according to the philosophy of the momentary. It is urgent to learn how to live from moment to moment without the preoccupations of the past, without the projections of the future. Truth is the unknown from moment to moment. Our minds have to be always alert, with full attention, without prejudgments and preconcepts, in order to be truly receptive. It is necessary to learn how to live wisely, to refine our senses, to refine our behavior, our thoughts, and our feelings. It is of no use to have a great academic culture if we do not know how to listen, if we are unable to discover the new from moment to moment. The rough, rude, deteriorated, and degenerated minds can never know how to discover the new. That kind of mind only understands, and in a mistaken form, the absurd translations of that secretary called the I, ego, myself. The fanatics of Marxism, Leninism do not accept the new. They do not admit the fourth characteristic of everything, that is to say, the fourth coordinate, because of their self-esteem, because they love themselves so much, because they are confined in their own absurd theories. And when we locate them in the field of the concrete facts, when we demonstrate to them how absurd their sophisms are, they raise the left arm, watch the clock, excuse themselves, and leave. Those are degenerated minds, decrepit minds that do not know how to listen, that do not know how to discover the new, that do not accept the reality because they are bottled up in self-esteem. They are people that love themselves too much, that know nothing about cultural refinements, that have rough and rude minds which only listen to their beloved ego. First of all, it is necessary to learn how to listen. In truth, those who know how to listen are very rare. Normally, when somebody is listening, in reality, they are not listening because their I, their ego, is translating it to its own language, to its own particular idiosyncrasy, to its own criterion. First of all, people must awaken the consciousness in order to learn how to listen. How could somebody who has a sleeping consciousness be able to listen psychologically? In order to know how to listen, it is necessary to be present. So I ask myself and you, are you sure that in this moment you are not walking in your homes, in your workshops, or in the countryside, or in some other place? We always see people seated, and they seem to be listening. However, how could the one who is not at home be able to be listening? Normally, when one is speaking about Gnosis, those that seem to be listening are not listening. They are escaping, are walking from here to there, from there to here, are traveling in their inner psychological city. Let us remember that within each one of us there is a psychological country. One thing is the physical place, and another is the psychological place where we are located. In what place are we located at this moment? You could say here, but that might be and might not be. The truth is that it is hard to know how to listen, because normally the person who is listening escapes, travels through his psychological country, and runs away in different directions. So the person is not at home. And if he is not at home, who is the one that is listening? The human personality. In truth, the human personality does not know how to listen. The physical body, it is just a mere instrument. When one speaks to another person, and I am saying this especially to our missionaries, one thinks that they are alert. However, they are just listening in an apparent manner because they are not at home. There are some that are so full of themselves that they do not want to listen to the word. They do not have an empty place, a small corner for our word. They are full of vanities, prides of their theories, etc. Where could the word enter if they are full of themselves? Let us remember Jesus and his birth, his parents walking to the census, called by Herod. They did not find an empty place. In the inner tavern, there is not an empty place for the word. The tavern is full. The inn is full. How serious is this? We have to have the small bowl of the Buddha to have it upwards in order to receive the word. However, people, instead of doing that, put the bowl downwards. It would be necessary to recognize our own inner misery in order to have a place for the word in the small bowl, in the pot. As long as we are full of ourselves, how could the word enter into ourselves? In other words, how could we learn to listen from a psychological point of view? Because to know how to listen physically is something relatively easy, but psychologically, how difficult it is. It is necessary to be in a receptive attitude, with the pot upward, waiting for the nourishment in the Buddhist style. But if the pot is downward, how could the nourishment enter into us? How could we receive it? Those that are full of pride of self-sufficiency, those that are full of theories, do you believe that they are in the correct state to receive the word? First of all, we have to recognize our own misery and inner poverty before receiving the nourishment of the word. However, it is not possible to receive that nourishment if we do not know how to listen. It happens that we have listened to a word thousands and even millions of times, and we believe that we know it, that we have listened to it, but as a matter of fact, we have not listened to that word. Any day, we listen to that word again, and we feel there is something new. Why do we feel it as something new? Because we have always listened with a sleeping consciousness. And one day we had the luck to listen to it while being in a state of awakened consciousness. Observe how difficult it is to know how to listen. First of all, it is necessary to be auto-conscious if we want to know how to listen. Let us remember the temptation of Jesus when the devil said to him, "All these things will I give thee if thou wilt fall down and worship me." There we have the temptation. Jesus Christ was asked to put the pot downwards, not upwards, in order to receive the inner word that comes from the height, but downward, in order to listen to the external things, in order to listen to the world of the external senses. So why did Jesus not fall? Because he was always alert and vigilant as the watchman in time of war. He had the small bowl upward. However, if he would have fallen in temptation, that is to say, if he would have put the small bowl, the pot, downward, he would have listened to the external words, the things that come from outside, the things of the world. He would not have been able to listen psychologically. So, my dear brothers, we have to become more receptive to the words. We have to learn to listen psychologically. I repeat, how could it be possible to listen if we are out of the house? Who are out of the house? All the unconscious ones. Are you sure that you are listening now? Could you affirm it? Could you affirm? Could you promise that you are total? Are you not walking in other places? The crude reality of the facts is that when people are listening, they do not know how to listen because they are in other places. They are not at home. Why do people not remember their past existences? How could it be possible if they are not at home? Can one remember something that has not been experienced? To stay at home. Who knows what being at home means? I am talking about the human person. Normally, the being is out of the house. Then, how could we remember past existences if we were all time out of the house? There are two capital things in our Gnostic studies. First, to remember ourselves, that is to say, to remember our own being, and second, the relaxation of the body. To remember oneself and to relax the body is something that we have to do constantly. Remember that the body, the nerves, the muscles are always in tension. There is the necessity to learn to remember oneself and to relax the body. I do so every day, continuously, in the bed or everywhere. To do that is something indispensable. As a matter of fact, people make many mistakes and have so many mistaken theories because they forget the being. If Laplace, the great French astronomer and mathematician, would not have forgotten himself, his own being, he would not have conceived in his mind the theory, the famous theory of Laplace, that false and absurd theory. When Laplace presented his theory to Napoleon Bonaparte and explained to him how from the nebula comes forth a planet or a solar system, Napoleon said to him, "And where is a place for God in your theory?" He answered cynically, "Not, sir, I did not need God in order to elaborate my theory." Observe the self-sufficiency. It is precisely because he forgot his inner being that he could elaborate his false theory. Because no astronomer of the planet Earth has seen with his eyes a planet coming forth or emerging from a nebula. However, this is admitted by many fools as a dogma. If Laplace would not have forgotten himself, he would not have elaborated that absurd theory. There is a fool that put some drops of oil in a cup of water. With a small stick, he revolved the drops of oil. This produced rings that stayed rotating around the central drop. In this form was formed the universe. He was asked, "And God?" Now it was not answered, the question about God. As a matter of fact, people make many mistakes and have so many mistaken theories because they forget the being. If Laplace, the great French astronomer and mathematician, would not have forgotten himself, his own being, he would not have conceived in his mind the theory, the famous theory of Laplace, that false and absurd theory. When Laplace presented his theory to Napoleon Bonaparte and explained to him how from the nebula comes forth a planet or a solar system, Napoleon said to him, "And where is a place for God in your theory?" He answered cynically, "Not, sir. I did not need God in order to elaborate my theory." Observe the self-sufficiency. It is precisely because he forgot his inner being that he could elaborate his false theory. Because no astronomer on planet Earth has seen with his eyes a planet coming forth or emerging from a nebula. However, this is admitted by many fools as a dogma. If Laplace would not have forgotten himself, he would not have elaborated that absurd theory. There is a fool that put some drops of oil in a cup of water. With a small stick, he revolved the drops of oil. This produced rings that stayed rotating around the central drop. In this form was formed the universe. He was asked, "And God?" In these days, when we are working with Pistis Sophia, I say that Pistis Sophia in the chaos is definitive. Really, Sophia is wisdom of fire and shines in the chaos. This is why it is said that the light comes forth from the darkness and that the cosmos comes forth from the chaos. Pistis Sophia, as fire, shines in the chaos in order to create and to recreate. The divine wisdom is in the chaos, and from the chaos it can come forth in order to arrive to the Ion 13, to the 13th serpent, to the 13 numeral 7th. So, my dear brothers, we have to reflect more and more about this. Great things come to one when one does not forget his being, when one remembers oneself profoundly. It is advisable for the brothers that on a daily basis, for 5, 10 minutes, a while, or half an hour, you remember yourselves to relax the body completely on a sofa. In that way, one day you will be able to reach the experience of the real. That practice is a way to act over the emotional center using the motor center and being in complete relaxation, living the being, feeling him, experimenting him. It is fundamental to become receptive to the being. The personality has to become more and more passive and receptive to the word that comes from the height. That word comes through the superior centers of the being and arrives. However, if we are not receptive, if we do not learn to relax ourselves, if we forget ourselves, how could we receive the messages that come through the superior centers of the being? The brothers have to comprehend that we have to become receptive, that it is necessary to learn to receive the word and to capture its profound meaning. We have to relax and remember ourselves and our own being daily. In this form, we will advance successfully. Well, if there is some brother that wants to ask, he can do it with entire freedom. Everybody has the right to ask, but not getting out of the theme. I would like to know, Venerable Master, when a student is not in self-remembrance, is it useless for him to ask for counsel to a master because he will be unable to listen? Well, to ask for counsel is necessary, but to know how to listen is indispensable. So it is not absurd to ask for counsel. What is absurd is not to know how to listen. Is there some other question, brothers? Through the education of the word, is it possible to learn how to listen? One thing is to speak, and another is to listen. If we do not know how to listen, we will not have the true knowledge. In order to know how to listen, It is necessary to stay alert and vigilant, to be conscious. It is also necessary the existence of a total balance between the knowledge and the comprehension, or between the knowledge and the being. However, one thing is to listen and another thing is to speak. To educate the word is convenient, but it is indispensable to know how to listen.
Master, when one is in front of you, there is a lethargy of the mind. One is unable to absorb all the Master's word, the transcendental knowledge. That is to say, one feels perplexed and stunned before the Master's wisdom. So it is really hard to listen to you. So, what could we do in order to learn how to listen to you, Venerable Master?
I have listened to your words. Undoubtedly, it is necessary to know how to listen. The state of alert perception, alert novelty, is needed if one wants to listen. However, I repeat, how can the one who is not at home know how to listen? Normally, the people that form the audience escape. They have multiple inhuman psychic aggregates that go and come everywhere. So, they are in the auditorium listening, but they are not. And listening, they do not listen because they are out of the house. If one wants to know how to listen, one has to be integral, as a whole, in front of the lecturer. The three centers, the intellectual, the emotional, and the motor, have to be united, integrated. But if those three centers are disassociated, the intellectual going its way, the emotional in another, and the motor in another, then one is not listening to the word. So to know how to listen is something very difficult but fundamental. Because if one learns how to listen, one can receive complete information about the Gnostic esoteric work. Let us take into account that the practical life has many faces. Life in a state of unconsciousness has terrible faces. It looks like the life of humanity in the state of unconsciousness has more force than the Gnostic esoteric knowledge. However, what happens is that people are so full of themselves that they cannot receive the information that is given through the word. They are full and do not receive the complete information. That is to say, they do not know how to listen. If one is listening, if one learns to listen in a state of alert perception, of alert novelty, then one can recognize through the word one is receiving that one is a nobody. Then there is an empty place where the word can enter. But while one feels full, vain, and satisfied with all of those egos, how will one receive the word? So we have to put our water jar, our small bowl upward, open, waiting for the word, the nourishment that will feed and orientate us. But if one turns the pot downward, how could one receive? One does not receive. It is necessary to put it upward, to have a place in order to receive the drop. The drop is the knowledge.
Master, the false education, the false moral, is it also an obstacle in order to learn how to listen?
Certainly the false education produces a lot of damage. I say that the education that one receives in the school, in the high school, kindergarten, and university is false, because it is not related with any of the autonomous and self-conscious parts of the being. Being false, it distorts the 5 centers of the machine and nourishes many inhuman psychic aggregates. A person with a robust false personality is a person that is not disposed to listen, that does not know how to listen, that always listens to the subjective, infraconscious, infrahuman voices of the 5 centers of the organic machine. The only voices that he knows how to listen to are those of the false personality. He is always full of knowledge and does not have an empty place where the instructor could deposit the word. So the false education prejudices frightfully. And about the false moral, I do not know about what kind of moral you are speaking about.
Well, the moral attached to the old, to the tradition?
That moral is useless. Let us speak about a revolutionary ethic. The moral is a slave of the customs, the places, and the epoch. What is moral in one country in another is immoral. What in one epoch was moral is immoral in another. Let us see a concrete case. In China, until not long ago, to kill the father because he was very old was seen as moral, and to exchange little girls for mail stamps with the Catholic missionaries was moral. There was a priest that brought hundreds, thousands of little girls, acquired with mere stamps. It was normal to throw a girl to the street. Because she was a woman, they threw them. They felt happy only when a male was the one that was born. So, what is the moral? The moral is a slave of the customs. I could quote thousands of cases, some of them very painful and even shameful ones, about the so applauded moral. The moral is a slave of the customs, of the times, of the prejudgments of humanity. It is not useful. Everyone that wants to walk through the path of the inner self-realization of the being has to liberate himself from the moral. Let us speak about the revolutionary ethic. That sounds better. One has to learn to do an inventory of oneself in order to know what one has in excess and what one needs, and also to learn to manage the virtues. A virtue, even if it is very holy, if it is out of its place, produces damage. There are many saints that have prejudiced humanity with their virtues. That is the crude reality of the facts. However, the virtues are precious, but the one that does not know how to manage them obviously generates damage with his virtues. So, do not speak about morale, let us speak about revolutionary ethic. The moral is useless. It prejudices our development. Is there another question?
Master, it is necessary to know how to listen and to stay at home. Could you now speak something about the bad secretary?
The bad secretary is the ego. The lecturer has not finished speaking yet. When the ego of everybody, according to their psychological idiosyncrasy, has formed its personal concept, a false concept, because it is based in the prejudgments, in the fears, in the false theories, in the false education, etc., 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 and many other herbs. The bad secretary produces a lot of damage. For this reason, it is necessary to be alert and vigilant, disposed to receive the word, but paying attention and being present. If we are absent, how could we receive it? I repeat, why do people not remember their past existences? Because they are never present, never at home. The physical body dies, and we are never at home. How could they remember past existences if they were never at home? Inferential peace